welcome everyone today to our HR meeting. I will just go through the fire evacuations. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this afternoon. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exits are located at the rear and the side of this room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. This meeting is being webcast, and so yes, just to let you know, are we on now on the webcast? Good. Yes.
Much as it's lovely to see you, there's two of you.
Really?
Yes, because what's happening is that up there is being picked up by the webcast. So if we don't need that screen, if we just close the screen, then we wouldn't have to look at you twice each time that you're on.
I would absolutely agree with you on that one.
Well, we were getting half of it, you see. You got some half and then the screen was failed.
No, are we okay now? Okay. Thank you. And mobile phones, please put them on silent. Thank you. Okay, let's start the agenda. So, apologies for absence. We have Councillor Mrs Tucker, who is replaced by Councillor Mrs Court, Councillor Dan Putty, who is replaced by Councillor Sven Goderson, and Councillor Bean is the new member on this committee, so welcome, Councillor Bean. And welcome to Simon Christian, who's the member for the Staff Forum. Are there any other apologies? I don't think, no. Okay. Any declarations of interest? Okay, item 3, are there any urgent matters that you know of? No. Item 4, minutes of the committee meeting held on the 17th of November 2014. Members, are you happy with the minutes? Thank you. I will sign those. Okay, we'll do it afterwards. Right, moving on. Item 5, this is to note for information the joint consultative committee meeting, which was held on the 11th of December 2014. So that's just to note for your information. Item 6, pay policy statement for 2015-16, paper C. Sorry if I jumped somewhere.
Well, I was just going to say, we're noting the minutes of the meeting. Since there's a number of actions coming from the consultative committee, is there any update that Shelley could give us on the actions? Since we are, we're noting something, we might as well find out where we've got to as well.
Yes, certainly, Councillor Sanders. I can just give you an update. So if I just take you through, the first action arising is on page 5 of 47, and it was agreed that Staff Forum and Unison will provide updates as a standing agenda item for future meetings, and that has been now added to the agendas, so that's taking place. The Friday weekly email is now being circulated to all council members, so that has been actioned. Paul Bone... Yep, sorry.
There was some discussion about whether it was appropriate or not to have that circulated to council members. And I'd just like to say that I'm really glad that we did ask for it. There's nothing wrong with the language at all. It's quite refreshing. And my understanding from staff that I've spoken to is that they're happy that we see it. So that was a really good thing.
Thank you. Just working down that page 6, Paul Beaumont, our Corporate Health and Safety Advisor, has picked up the concerns that were raised about the PPE that's supplied to the operations team, and that was discussed at the last Operations Health and Safety Committee. The Council's programme on management and leadership development, I circulated details of that to Councillor Pearce for information, and we've had some discussions over email about that. Moving on to page 7, the Staff Forum did have a session at the last meeting in January about sort of what motivates staff to come to work and reward and recognition generally. We actually ran out of time to have a really full discussion, so we didn't actually touch on the specific suggestion that was put forward that the Mayor become involved in some sort of long service award ceremony. But certainly we will raise that at the next staff forum so that it can be covered. And we are doing some more work around the quality of performance management conversations and the impact of the Leadership and Management Development Programme. We're actually working with the provider who is delivering that training for us. It's a company called First Ascent. I actually have a meeting with them tomorrow morning to talk to them about how we can do some follow-up with staff to look at whether that actual programme is having the impact on staff and the quality of leadership and management that they're experiencing. So that follow-up is taking place. And then over the page, the draft agenda will be circulated. The next meeting is in June, so that will be circulated nearer the time. And the meeting, as I say, has been arranged for June. So.
Thank you, Shella. Thank you for asking that question, Councillor Saunders. Agenda item 6, which is paper C, pay policy statement for 2015 to 16. Shella, would you please present the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper sets out the Council's pay policy statement for next year, 2015-16, the next financial year. It's a requirement of the Localism Act that every council has a pay policy statement which must be adopted by full council and must be reviewed annually. So Appendix A of this report includes the updated pay policy statement with track changes on from last year's statement, so you can see what changes have been made, and those are also summarised in section 5 of the report, and then Appendix B contains a version without all the track changes on. One of the key aspects of the pay policy statement is the inclusion of a pay ratio, which helps explain the relationship between the pay for the Chief Executive as the highest paid member of staff and the median pay for all staff, for all other staff. So members will note that this is reduced slightly in this year's pay policy statement from a multiple of 5.1 last year to, or in this current year rather, to 4.7 next year. That essentially means that the gap between the highest pay and the median pay for all staff has reduced slightly, and that's explained in the report as to why that's happened. Appendix C contains information about the pay ratio for councils across Hampshire, as in the past members have said that they would find that information useful, just so that you can benchmark how we fare against our neighbouring authorities. And you can see that our pay ratio is actually just below the average for other district councils. I've worked that out to be 4.8 and we're 4.7, so we're just below the average. So HR Committee is asked to recommend to full council that the pay policy statement is in Appendix D is adopted, and I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Shella. Questions? Councillor Jones?
Thank you, Chair. On page 17 of 47, it's paper C, it's other chief officers. Well, last year you had 13, this year you got 18. Just wonder where the other 5 chief officers have arrived from. If you see what I mean, it's a lot of money.
Yeah, that's explained in the report in paragraph 5.2. And basically it's come about because the statutory position of monitoring officer has been reassigned. It was previously assigned to Laura Taylor as the Director of Governance and Commissioning, and in December last year full council agreed that it would be reassigned to the Head of Commissioning and Governance. Now, under the pay policy statement definition, the definition of chief officer includes all senior managers reporting directly to the statutory chief officer posts, and the monitoring officer is one of those posts. So that means that we've had to include additionally all of the officers who report to the Head of Governance and Commissioning, whereas previously because the Director of Commissioning and Governance was the monitoring officer, it didn't include all of those posts. So there are 5 posts that report to the Head of Governance and Commissioning, and that's why the number has increased from 13 to 18. It doesn't actually increase that those people are already on the sort of pay range that's reported in here, so it hasn't actually affected the pay range for that. And those staff haven't received a pay award or anything as a result of that. It is literally just a change in the reporting arrangements.
Thank you, Charlotte. Any more questions? Councillor Pearce?
My question is on the Chief Executive. Is that reduction because of a different car allowance or a different lease? It is. Okay.
Yeah, it's because previously staff above a certain grade were entitled to either a lease allowance or a cash alternative allowance. A few years ago, this committee actually agreed to stop the lease car allowance, and those have been phased out for staff over a period of 2 years. There was a protected period. When Tony Curtis left, the lease car allowance left with him, so new staff just have the ability to have a cash alternative allowance. The cash alternative allowance is lower than what the council would contribute towards the lease car allowance, and that's the reason for the differential. His base pay is exactly the same as the previous Chief Executive.
Thank you, Charlotte. Councillor Godison?
Thank you, Chair. Purely as a matter of interest, 31 of 47, I'm just curious as to how many of our officers have been re-employed?
I don't have those figures with me. Off the top of my head, I can think of one officer who was made redundant about 3 years ago and has been re-employed in the last few months. That's the only one that I can think of, but if it would help, I could check for certain and email that information round to the committee, but it's very, very few, if any, that have been made redundant and then come back. And as I say, I can think of one, and there's been a gap of about 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, no, I mean, please don't concern yourself about that. I was only curious because I do remember about 3 years ago an officer who should be nameless was made redundant and was then re-employed almost immediately in another capacity, which at the time I found rather curious. Thank you. But I mean, please don't accept your response.
Councillor Jones?
Just on that question, if someone's made redundant and re-employed, are they being re-employed in their old position?
No, absolutely not. Their old position, by the very nature of it being made redundant, was deleted from the establishment. They have come back after a new, completely different post was advertised. They went through a selection process in competition with other external candidates and they were awarded a post. It's a completely different post.
Councillor Sanders?
Yeah, it's a question, Shannon, which, just looking at the 33 of 47, the pay ratio comparisons, not so much on the ratios, but just looking at the median remuneration for all council employees, an enormous spectrum there from New Forest at 19,000 up to Rushmore at 29,000. I mean, we're getting on for 30% difference. And then there's some notable missing persons here, like Hart and Winchester. Do we understand the reason for this variance? Is it to do with the nature of jobs, or why some people, or are they paying less than others are paying, or just, it'd be very interesting to dig a bit deeper into this, because so that we just actually do appreciate where we stand amongst other councils for, you know, similar grades, etc.
We're actually doing some pay benchmarking at the moment through a system called e-Paycheck, which is the local government association's a sort of electronic pay benchmarking system. So that will give us some of the information that you've just mentioned. I know, for example, that at New Forest they employ directly still all their leisure services, so they will have leisure attendants, for example, which probably does pull down the salaries for New Forest, because a big proportion of their workforce will be those leisure attendant type roles that do tend to be lower paid. So that probably explains the differential for New Forest. I think when we've benchmarked our pay for other roles in the past, we have an aspiration to be in the upper quartile in comparison with other councils. And certainly when we've tested that in the past, we have been up in the upper quartile, but we've not been wildly off track from anybody else. So I don't think it's the case that we're paying wildly more than other councils or anything like that. But certainly the pay benchmarking data, when that's available, will show us for certain what the differential has, how that's come about.
Yeah, I suspect that there must be something like that. There are some groups of people that are in one council that are not in another, to give you that enormous variance on the median remuneration for employees. It's interesting when you look at the chief execs ones. I mean, you would expect to find us at the top end because we're the largest borough district in the group, with the exception of New Forest, who are the same size as we are, or actually slightly bigger in terms of population. Whereas some of these other ones, East Hants, what on earth they're doing, paying 128,000, I don't know. So again, I think it will be useful just to do some benchmarking there as well, so we see where we stand. But not only with Hampshire ones, but I think we need to look at Surrey and West Berks as well. So, but it wouldn't do us any harm to look at that.
Yes, certainly. The benchmarking that we're doing is national, but we can also put it down to sub-regional level, so we can look at other councils in the South East or the South West or London, etc. But also it's worth saying that East Hants and Havant, of course, are a joint chief executive for both of those councils. So they are the chief executive for Havant and East Hants, but they still have to report the pay ratio separately because they're still two separate employers.
Yes, but she's not being paid 200 and whatever that is, 256. So she will be being paid. Yeah. So actually, that. Yes. So they're actually getting 60, whatever it is, 64,000. They're getting value for money out of their poor lady.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say I'm fascinated and a margin disappointed at the ratio for Hampshire County Council. I mean, it clearly is that there's just this one person that is being paid megabucks for a public authority post, and otherwise that ratio would be a lot lower. I just pass that as a comment. I hope we never get to that situation.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Any more questions? Oh, Councillor Loney. No.
You were clear, Shella, that we look at our salaries on the higher ratio. Are all these on the same, or do a lot of them actually benchmark at medium anyway?
It's actually up to each council to determine where it wants to set its pay, and part of the purpose of having a pay policy statement is that you make that open and transparent for your residents and other people who are interested to actually see. So it's entirely up to them who they benchmark against. I know, for example, that a lot of them do benchmark against sort of the median within their pay benchmarking group, for example, which probably explains why we're a little higher in terms of our median rate for all staff.
Okay, that's all questions. The recommendation, members, to refer this paper back to full council, the policy statement. Are we happy to do that? Good. Thank you very much. Item 7, paper D, is HR operational management issues, and this is an interim report. I'm back to you again, Shella, please.
Thank you, Councillor Still. So this is a report that we provide to the committee every 6 months to bring you all up to date on key performance and management information for the council's workforce. And this report covers the first 3 quarters of the current financial year, and then the next report in September 2015, which is when this committee next meets, will cover the total year. So with regards sickness absence, which you'll obviously see is one of the main features of this report, overall absence levels have reduced again compared to the last 2 years, which is a positive indicator. And you'll have seen from the minutes of the last joint consultative committee that we had a detailed discussion around some of the reasons for absence and what the council does in response to them. Appendix 2 of the report contains some examples of the sorts of health and wellbeing proactive initiatives that we have in place for our staff. And I just wanted to let members know that since writing this report, we have put on, or are putting on, a health fair for all staff. That's taking place next week. And as part of that, we're offering free one-to-one health checks for staff, and it covers things like blood pressure, diabetes, cholesterol, risk, etc. And following that one-to-one health check, they also have access to an online wellbeing check for 12 months. So that has been, I've had a really good take-up of those free one-to-one health checks as well. So if members have any questions about the information provided, I'm very happy to answer them if I can.
Questions, members? Councillor Saunders?
I never like to let an opportunity to ask questions go past. Firstly, the 3.75 for the sickness absence, that is just what the straight average is. It's not been ratioed in any other way, because that is a significant drop from 7.1. It's nearly 50%, which is very impressive altogether. And is that? I mean, because we don't have the individual quarters. Was there one particular quarter that contributed to this, and the other 2 were less the case, or has it been a steady decline? That's my first question. My second one was that are members allowed to have these one-to-one health checks?
I asked the same question in my pre-meeting.
In terms of the quarter-by-quarter data, we do report that as part of the Council's balanced scorecard. So if you look at the performance data on that, you can see quarter-by-quarter. It's been steadily the same every quarter. And what we used to adjust for seasonal variance as well, because you tend to find that perhaps people will go off more in the winter months with flu and that kind of thing. But what we found last year, actually, is that in the last 2 quarters of the last financial year, absence levels went down. Compared to the previous 2 quarters. So that trend actually didn't follow through. So I haven't made any adjustment this time round for seasonal variance. But that 3.75 is, of course, only for the first 3 quarters of the year. It doesn't include the final quarter's figures. But if the current trends are anything to go by, if we base it on last year's quarter 4, absence levels were around the same. So each quarter has been roughly the same. In terms of the health checks, they're not available for members at the moment, but we could certainly look into putting some on for members. We've got a waiting list of staff who want them as well, so I'm sure we'll be putting on another day of them.
Councillor Loney?
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask, I noticed a large number of days off on customer services, and that's where you're having direct face-to-face. Is the stress factor an issue there, being as there is much more, if you like, face-to-face with customers? Sorry.
Yeah, you can probably see in here that they're actually in the current financial year to date, their average days lost have reduced significantly. They did previously have, and this was reported to the committee, they did previously have some staff off with long-term sickness, and it was due to anxiety, stress, depression. Some of it work-related, some of it not work-related, but certainly that is something that the customer services team have been working very proactively to try and address, and you'll see that in the current year to date they've made a significant impact in reducing that.
Councillor Pearce.
Let me get this in the right order. I keep going back to it. Sorry. Yeah, sickness absence average days lost. Page 39 of 47. Just coming back to Councillor Sanders' point, it is an impressive reduction, but am I right in thinking that this quarter would tend to be higher? Can you give us, are you able to project to the end of the year, shall I, as to what you think that will be? I mean, I can't see it doubling, but that's my first question. Do you want me to go through my questions and then refer back to the office?
Do you want to go that one?
Yeah, this is a similar question to Councillor Sanders just asked. Historically, Q3 and Q4 sickness levels did tend to be higher. And you would expect that to some degree, as I was saying, because of flu and those sorts of things. But what we found last year is that that wasn't the case. Sickness absence levels in Q3 and Q4 were actually less than in Q1 and Q2. In the last 3 quarters, the amount of sickness absence has been largely the same in the last 3 quarters. So our best prediction is that Q4 will be largely the same, and that's why the projected figure for the full year is around about 5 days.
Sort of following on from my colleague on my right, it is significant, isn't it, the average days lost in both commissioning and governance and community services is significantly higher than any other department. That's page 40 of 41. If you look down the right-hand side, average days lost. I accept, and I'm pleased to be able to see that it is reducing from 2 years ago, and significantly reducing in customer services and human resources. Is there any targeted work being done to determine cause? Because when we come on later, I'll be coming on later to the issue of stress. And I wonder whether these are related. That's the first question on those.
Yeah, there is targeted work going forward in both business units. The HR business partners work very closely with the head of service and the managers in all of these business units to look in much more detail at the particular issues that are taking place within each department, what the particular issues are. And you'll appreciate that in some of the slightly smaller business units like commissioning and governance, 1 or 2 people going long-term sick will have a bigger impact proportionally than they would in a larger department. So there is some targeted work happening in both of those areas. In both of those areas, I believe the highest reason for sickness absence is as the same in most of our business units. It is anxiety, stress, depression. So that is still the highest reason for absence in most of our business units. But hopefully you'll also see that the number of people going off with that reason and the length of time that they are off with is reducing in terms of that absence, as you'll see in some of the other tables further on.
Thank you. The numbers in commissioning and governance are quite high, actually, aren't they? It's the 3rd or 4th highest. So, okay. I mean, I'm sure it is. It's bound to be stress, isn't it? Over the page. The comment there was that, assuming that trend continues, and you've shown it in the graph as continuing, that's also good news, isn't it?
Yes.
30 days. Yep.
Percentage, 30%.
Sorry, yeah, 30%, I beg your pardon. Page 42 or 47. Is there anything more you want to say about the considerably higher level of absence when you even compare to numbers of individuals? And back problems 21, average days off 18, with stress and anxiety, 8, stress and anxiety, it's double that. With the department with 15 individuals on the musculoskeletal compared with 14 people on number 7 chest and respiratory. I mean, I know that they are longer term. We spoke previously about the staff welfare programme and the health cover impacting on that. Can you give me any more indication that that trend is going to come, why you think that trend is going to continue downwards?
Yes, certainly. I think for two reasons. We're working much more proactively with the managers now to positively and proactively manage long-term sickness absence cases. So the intervention is earlier, which means that the support for the employee is earlier, and that might be support through occupational health, or it might be the offer of counselling, cognitive behavioural therapy, etc. We work much more proactively as an HR team to support the manager, to support their member of staff, if that makes sense. The second thing that we're doing is to, we have a new occupational health provider, the Robins Institute, who are part of Surrey University. And we are again working much more proactively with them to address those long-term cases and much more effectively case manage those individuals. The Robins Centre have also delivered some training to managers as well. The training was offered to managers who particularly have issues around stress, anxiety, depression with their staff. And the training focused on how to be proactive, how to do a stress risk assessment for when the employee comes back to work, when to offer intervention. In some cases, that very few of the cases are actually directly work-related. Most of our stress, anxiety, depression cases are due to personal reasons, but either way, whether it's work or home-related, it still impacts on the council. So it's really important that we do that proactive work, and we're doing that through working with the managers and working with our occupational health provider to try and get that support at the earliest possible time to get the person back to work more quickly, hopefully.
Two more questions. The first is, we've made a cash investment in the process of trying to improve attendance record. Are you able to show the fiscal nature of the savings? Again, in other words, are we getting fewer days sickness absence, and did we spend more than we lost, in other words? Because it would be pointless to spend the money and then realise that we had only gained a few days and that we effectively had wasted the money. So you have that to hand, or are you going to have to come back to me on that? No, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay.
The healthcare cash plan scheme, the council funds the employee contribution towards that. The employee can contribute more if they wish to. We do steadily monitor the claims ratio to see what sort of things people are claiming for. I have to say that the vast majority of those claims are for optical issues, so glasses, those sorts of things, and dental checkups. So, you know, we're going to have a filling and you claim that back through the healthcare scheme. None of those are absences for which staff are reporting sick frequently. But I think what it is showing, we did some work with staff a year or two ago to reassess what was on offer to staff through the healthcare cash plan scheme. And what staff told us is that they use it more as an insurance scheme, and they really value it on that basis. So whilst the majority of claims aren't for things like an MRI scan or a consultant checkup, they really value the opportunity to access that as and when they should need it. So I can't say to you that the investment that the council makes in the healthcare cash plan scheme directly correlates with our reduced sickness absence levels, but staff tell us that it's something that they really value because it's there should they need it, if they need quick access to MRI or consultants' opinion, that sort of thing.
So, okay, I'm not unhappy with that if it's a good thing. So is it just a coincidence then that musculoskeletal and stress have reduced? Or is that due to anything else?
There are a number of things that we do. That I think the healthcare cash plan scheme does help with that, because it has also physiotherapy that staff can access, and that is something that staff are accessing through the healthcare cash plan scheme. Something else that we have at the council is access to a clinical massage practitioner, and staff can reclaim through the healthcare cash plan scheme the cost of seeing the clinical massage practitioner if they have been referred for that treatment by their GP. And a number of staff I know have taken advantage of that. So there has also been some work with the occupational health advisor to look at particular back issues within the council. So there's been a number of things that we've been doing proactively to try and encourage people to get treatment early if they have an issue with back problems or with some kind of musculoskeletal injury.
So we're talking about self-awareness then? Okay, good. Is this Nicola? Yeah, she's my neighbour. Perhaps I should declare an interest. Oh no, that's the same. No, yes, the very final point on 46 of 47. You need to help me a little bit, Shella. I'm not quite sure what no value means. Is this people who have refused to say what their ethnic origin is, and why would you, or refuse to say they have a disability, or refuse to tell us their age? That doesn't make sense. Are you there, Chair? Yeah. Sorry.
I'm not Superwoman. I'm looking to see what you're referring to.
I've heard different, but there you go. It's really the no value one that I'm, at the bottom on age. We must know how old people are. I can understand refusals on the other.
I don't know, Shella. Do you have an answer?
Unfortunately, our current recruitment system does allow people not to put an answer into that. Now, on the ethnic origin one, you absolutely should have an option for people to decline to give a response to that. Unfortunately, that's also the case with our age profile, so people don't have to give a response if they don't want to. It's something that we're changing with an upgrade of the system that's coming about at the moment.
Yeah, I find that amazing. Does it apply to the payroll as well then? No. Okay, so we do know how old these people are. So if we did that, I know it's a small point, but if we did that age range check on the payroll data, it would come out proper. Yeah.
Yeah, this data for this table is for our job applicants, not our staff. So these are people who are applying to work with us. For our staff, we do have all the information around their age, whether they're disabled, etc., etc. Yeah.
It is.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. We've got Councillor Jones. Did you want to come back on that point? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, carry on.
A point, because if it's an application for a job, you shouldn't have age being, otherwise you get ageism creeping in. So that may be why people aren't putting it in there.
Councillor Saunders. Councillor Jones.
Just a quickie. This long-term, on page 41 and 47, long-term absence, I don't know whether I would like to see a bit more information on that, in as much as it's from 10 days or more. You know, 10 days is a long time, but it's not real long-term absence in my eyes. Could we perhaps in future have a bit of a breakdown from a month rather than 10 days? Do you do that? It would actually show up people who are really, that sounds terrible, people who are long-term sick, because you can have the flu for 2 weeks with different things, but if someone's injured and things like that, it'd be more in line to see where they are, and I'm assuming the drop is pretty great. Is it that we've saw people retired because of ill health recently in this last year that's changed some of these figures?
The benchmark that we use of 10 days or more being long-term absence is a benchmark that's used across Hampshire, and it helps us to benchmark our absence with other councils to see how we fare. We can, if it would assist members, to include, to break that further so that it's sort of very long-term absence, if you like, of anything of 28 days or more. We can certainly include that in future reports if that would be helpful. I can.
More relevant to see what's actually happening.
Yeah.
In real terms.
I can certainly do that for the year-end report. There have been no ill health retirements in the current year to date, though. So, yeah.
Councillor Loney?
Sorry, page 44 of 47. It really is for clarification. I've only ever done one in my years of employing people. Dismissal through ill health, is that because lack of engagement? Sorry, in the process. Here.
Yeah, if I can just explain, an ill health retirement is when somebody meets the specific criteria under the local government pension scheme, and that is that they are permanently incapable of carrying out their role and any other role until the age of 65, their normal retirement age. So you can imagine that it's quite a high threshold to actually meet the criteria for ill health retirement with a pension. What we sometimes find, though, is whilst somebody doesn't meet that criteria, there's still no prospect of them being able to return to work within a foreseeable time frame, within a reasonable time frame, no prospect of them being able to return in the foreseeable future, but they don't meet the ill health retirement criteria. There comes a time when you've exhausted every other avenue, and we do things, we look at what support we could give, we look at whether they could come back in an alternative role, but once you've exhausted all of those options, but there's still no prospect of them being able to return within a reasonable time frame, sometimes unfortunately that does mean that the council has to make a decision to dismiss them from their employment with notice, but end their employment because they cannot come back to work. And there's, as you can see, it's very few of them.
Here,
yeah,
dismissal.
Yes, absolutely.
Rather than the background.
Yeah,
I think it's important, being as this is
Any more questions, members? Well, I'm quite heartened by this report. I think we're certainly moving in the right direction. So, members, this is just for noting. That's the recommendation, and we have noted it. That's the end of the meeting. Thank you all very much for coming.